The December wind cut through the Nevada desert like a blade carrying with it the scent of snow and sage. Maxwell Brennan stood in the doorway of his garage, watching the storm clouds gather over the distant mountains. His weathered hands, scarred from decades of wrenches and worse things, gripped a coffee mug that had long gone cold. 62 years old, and he still couldn't sleep through the night. The garage sat at the edge of Ashford, a town so small it barely warranted a stop sign. Main Street consisted of a diner, a post office, and Miller's General Store, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business except for Max. He'd made sure of that when he'd arrived 15 years ago, buying this garage with cash and keeping his head down ever since. Inside, the space smelled of motor oil and old leather. 3 motorcycles in various states of repair lined the far wall. Max had built his reputation on 2 things. He could fix anything with 2 wheels, and he didn't ask questions. The locals appreciated both qualities, though they whispered about the tattoos that sometimes showed beneath his rolled-up sleeves, the faded ink of a past he never discussed. The Devil's Reaper, they'd called him once. Maxwell Brennan, vice president of the Hells Angels Northern Nevada chapter. A lifetime ago, before the blood, before Lily, he pushed the thought away, same as he did every time her name surfaced in his mind. 20 years gone, and the wound still felt fresh. The radio crackled in the corner, some news anchor droning on about a storm system moving through the region. Max walked back inside, pulling the heavy door shut against the wind. He'd finish the carburetor work on Henderson's Harley, maybe tackle the brake system on the Ducati if time allowed. Work kept the demons quiet, kept his hands busy, kept him from thinking too much about what he'd lost. That's when he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the howl of wind outside. A scraping noise, metal against concrete, coming from the back storage room. Max set down his tools slowly, every muscle in his body tensing with the old instincts that never quite left a man, no matter how long he'd been out of the life. His hand found the heavy wrench on the workbench. Not a weapon, not exactly, but close enough. He moved silently across the garage floor, decades of practice making him light on his feet despite his size. The storage room door stood slightly ajar, darkness beyond. Max's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something older, something that remembered too many late-night ambushes, too many brothers who didn't make it home. He pushed the door open. Nothing but shadows and the hulking shapes of spare parts and old equipment. Max reached for the light switch, flooding the room with harsh fluorescent brightness. That's when he saw her. Tucked behind a stack of tire boxes, small enough that she'd almost disappeared into the shadows, was a little girl, 7, maybe 8 years old, with dark, tangled hair and eyes that held the kind of fear Max recognized immediately. She wore a thin jacket, torn at the sleeve, and jeans that were too big for her small frame. Her lips were blue from the cold, but it was what she held that stopped Max cold. In her trembling hands, she clutched a backpack to her chest like a lifeline. The bag was worn, covered in cartoon characters that seemed grotesquely cheerful against the stark terror on her face. And one hand held a piece of paper, crumpled and smudged with what might have been tears or dirt or both. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Max lowered the wrench, slowly setting it aside. He'd seen that look before in the eyes of men who'd lost everything, who'd been beaten down by life until nothing remained but the animal instinct to survive. Seeing it on a child's face made something twist deep in his gut. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice rough from disuse. "You okay?" The girl's eyes went wide. She pressed herself further into the corner, making herself even smaller. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, just the silent shape of words that wouldn't form. Max raised his hand slowly, showing her his empty palms. "Easy now, I'm not going to hurt you. This is my garage. You're safe here." Still nothing. The girl's chest rose and fell rapidly, her breathing too quick, too shallow. Max recognized the signs of panic, had seen it enough times to know when someone was on the edge. He took a step back, giving her space. "I'm Max," he said, keeping his voice low and even. "What's your name?" The girl's fingers tightened on the backpack. Her eyes darted to the door behind him, calculating, measuring the distance. Max could see her thinking about running, weighing her chances. "You don't have to tell me," he continued. "That's okay, but it's getting real cold out there, and that storm's not getting any better. You must be freezing." He gestured to his own jacket, then pointed at her thin one. "How about I get you something warm, maybe some hot chocolate? I think I've got some around here somewhere." The girl's gaze flickered to him, then away, but he saw something shift in her expression, a crack in the wall of fear. She was listening. Max backed toward the door slowly. "I'm going to go to my office right over there. You can see me the whole time. I'll get a blanket and something warm to drink. You can stay right here if you want, no pressure." He moved out of the storage room, keeping his movements slow and predictable. In his small office, he grabbed the wool blanket he kept on his cot for late nights when he didn't feel like going home to his empty house. He filled the electric kettle with water and dug through his desk drawer until he found an old packet of hot chocolate mix, probably expired, but still good enough. Through the open door, he could see the girl peering around the corner of the storage room, watching him. Her face was pale in the harsh light shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and horrors Max didn't want to imagine. The kettle boiled. Max poured the hot water into a chipped mug, stirred in the chocolate powder, and added a handful of mini marshmallows he found in the back of the drawer. He walked slowly back to the storage room door, setting the mug and blanket just inside the entrance. "There you go," he said, backing away again. "Warm yourself up. I'll be right out here working on some bikes. You take your time." He returned to his workbench, making a show of focusing on Henderson's carburetor, but every sense was attuned to the storage room, listening for movement, for any sign of what the girl might do next. Minutes passed. The wind rattled the garage doors. Max's hands worked automatically cleaning parts, checking connections, his mind elsewhere. Then he heard the soft scrape of feet on concrete. The girl emerged from the storage room, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, the mug of hot chocolate cradled in both hands. She stopped at the edge of his workspace, watching him with those two old eyes. Max glanced at her, then back at his work. "That chocolate okay? Not too hot?" She shook her head slightly. Still no words, but communication nonetheless. "Good." Max set down his tools, wiping his hands on a rag. "You know, I'm real glad you found this place. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. Better than being out in that storm." The girl took a small sip of the chocolate. Max noticed her hands were still trembling, but not from cold now, from something else, something deeper. She set the mug down on the workbench, her movements careful and deliberate. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the crumpled piece of paper he'd seen earlier. She smoothed it out on the metal surface, her fingers pressing the creases flat. Max leaned closer. It was notebook paper, lined and torn from a spiral binding. On it, in careful child's handwriting, were 3 words: "They hurt me." The world seemed to stop. Max stared at those 3 words, feeling something cold and terrible settle in his chest. He'd seen a lot of evil in his life, done things he wasn't proud of, but there were lines even the worst men didn't cross. And someone had crossed them with this child. He looked up at the girl's face. She was watching him, gauging his reaction, seeing if he would be like the others, if he would turn away or not believe or make it worse. Max's jaw tightened. "Who hurt you?" The girl pulled out another piece of paper from her pocket. This one had more words. "Foster home. Bad people. Can't go back. Please." Something in Max's chest cracked open, something he'd kept sealed away for 20 years. He saw Lily's face superimposed over this stranger's, saw his daughter at 8 years old, bright-eyed and full of life and trust in a world that would ultimately fail her. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay, sweetheart. You don't have to go back there." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She grabbed another paper from her pocket, this one clearly prepared in advance, showing Max she'd planned this encounter, thought it through with a child's desperate logic. "My name is Emma Hayes. I'm 7. My parents died. The people at the foster home hurt kids. I ran away. Can I stay here tonight? I'll leave in the morning. I promise." Max read the words twice, 3 times, feeling the weight of them settle over him like a physical thing. Every instinct screamed at him to call the authorities, to do this by the book, to not get involved beyond what was necessary. But then Emma pulled out one more thing from her backpack. She unzipped the main compartment, and Max saw bundles of cash, neatly stacked and bound with rubber bands. More money than he'd seen in one place in a long time, more money than a 7-year-old girl should ever have in her possession. Emma wrote quickly on a new piece of paper. "My daddy gave me this before the accident, said to keep it safe, said if anything happened, this would protect me. Can you help me?" Max stared at the money, then at Emma, then back at the money. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. A dead FBI agent, a traumatized child, $50,000 in cash, and a foster home where children were being abused. He should call the police. He should call social services. He should do this the right way, the legal way, the way that wouldn't drag him back into a world he'd spent 15 years trying to escape. But Emma was looking at him with those eyes, those ancient eyes in a child's face, and Max saw himself at 7 years old, saw the boy who'd grown up with no one to protect him, who'd had to learn too young that the world was cruel, and the adults who should have kept him safe couldn't be trusted. He saw Lily, 8 years old, laughing in the sunshine before the world went dark. "Yeah," Max heard himself say. "Yeah, I can help you." Emma's face transformed. The fear didn't disappear, not completely, but something else emerged beneath it. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. Max stood up slowly, his mind already working through the logistics. "First things first, we need to get you somewhere warm and safe for the night. My house isn't much, but it's better than here. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But Emma, I need you to understand something. Those people who hurt you, they're going to be looking for you. And this money, wherever it came from, someone's going to want it back. This isn't going to be easy. Emma wrote again. I know, I'm scared, but I'm more scared of going back there. Max nodded. Fair enough. Then we do this smart. We do this safe. And we do this together, deal. Emma's hand shook as she wrote one more word. Deal. Max grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, along with a heavier coat he kept for the coldest nights. He helped Emma into it, the sleeves hanging past her hands, the hem nearly reaching her knees. She looked even smaller somehow, drowning in fabric, but at least she'd be warm. My truck's out back, he said. We'll take the long way around town, avoid Main Street. Nobody needs to see us just yet, not until we have a plan. He locked up the garage, checking the doors twice out of old habit. The storm had intensified, snow beginning to fall in thick, heavy flakes. Max led Emma to his battered pickup truck, opened the passenger door, and helped her climb inside. As he started the engine, letting it warm up, he glanced at the little girl sitting next to him. She clutched her backpack to her chest, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the swirling snow outside the windshield. Emma, Max said quietly, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me, okay? She nodded, pulling out her notebook. That money in your bag, did your dad tell you where it came from? Emma wrote slowly. He said it was insurance, said if anything happened to him and Mom, I should find someone I could trust and give them the money, said it would keep me safe. Max's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Insurance, that's what they always called it in his old life. Insurance against betrayal, insurance against the law, insurance against other crews moving in on your territory. Evidence, more likely, evidence that got Emma's parents killed and put her in the crosshairs of whoever they'd been investigating. Did your dad work for the police or the FBI? Emma nodded, wrote, FBI. He investigated bad people. Mom said he was a hero. Christ, this just got a hell of a lot more complicated. Max put the truck in gear, pulling out of the garage lot and onto the dark road leading away from town. The snow fell harder now, the wipers working overtime to clear the windshield. He drove carefully, taking back roads he'd memorized over years of preferring solitude to socializing. His house sat 3 miles outside Ashford proper, a small ranch-style place with peeling paint and a yard full of weeds. But it was his bought with cash from the sale of his last bike, and it was far enough from town that people left him alone. He pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and sat for a moment in the silence. The reality of what he was doing, trying to help this little girl, when he could barely help himself, suddenly felt overwhelming. You ready? He asked more to himself than to Emma. She nodded, but her hand reached for his again as they walked toward the entrance. Max looked down at their joined hands, his large, calloused one engulfing her tiny fingers. He had no idea what he was doing, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to find a way to keep her safe. The house was cold, the heat turned down to save money. Max flicked on lights as they entered, suddenly seeing his home through Emma's eyes. Sparse furniture, bare walls, nothing that spoke of a life beyond mere existence. No photos, no decorations, nothing personal except for the single framed picture on the mantel, a photo he kept face down most days because looking at it hurt too much. Emma stood in the living room, small and lost in the oversized coat. Max cranked up the thermostat, heard the furnace rumble to life. Bathroom's down the hall if you need it, he said. Kitchen's through there. I don't have much food, but I can make you something. Eggs, toast, Emma wrote. I'm not very hungry, just tired. Max nodded. Fair enough, you can take my bed for tonight. I'll sleep on the couch. Emma shook her head vigorously, writing quickly. No, I don't want to take your bed. The couch is fine. Emma, she wrote faster, the words larger. Please, I like small spaces. I feel safer. Max understood that. He'd spent enough nights sleeping in closets or under beds in the early days when the nightmares were worst and the walls felt like they were closing in. Okay, he agreed, but let me get you some blankets and a pillow. Make it comfortable at least. He gathered bedding from his room, arranged it on the couch into something resembling a nest. Emma climbed in, still wearing the jacket, still clutching her backpack. She looked at Max with an expression that was part gratitude, part fear, part something else he couldn't quite name. Get some sleep, Max said softly. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. We'll figure this out in the morning. Emma's hand emerged from the blankets, holding her notebook. She'd written, Thank you, Mr. Max. You're the first adult who listened. Max felt that crack in his chest widen further. Yeah, well, someone should have been listening all along. He turned off the main lights, leaving only the small lamp in the corner burning. Emma's eyes were already drooping, exhaustion winning over fear. Max settled into the armchair across the room, telling himself he'd just sit there until she fell asleep, then he'd move to his own bed. But as he sat in the darkness watching Emma's breathing slow and deepen, he knew he wouldn't sleep tonight because sitting on his coffee table hidden inside Emma's backpack was $50,000 and the answers to questions that had probably gotten her parents killed. And somewhere out there, people were looking for both. Max stood and walked quietly to the window, peering through the curtains at the snow-covered driveway. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Good. That would buy them time, make it harder for anyone to track Emma here. He needed to think, needed to plan. This wasn't like the old days when he could solve problems with his fists or his reputation. This required finesse, required working within a system he'd spent most of his life avoiding. But first, he needed information. Max moved to his bedroom, closing the door softly behind him. He knelt beside his bed, reached underneath, and pulled out a locked metal box he hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside were things from his old life: burner phones, fake IDs, cash, and a small address book filled with names and numbers of people who owed him favors or feared him enough to help when asked. He flipped through the pages, looking for one name in particular: Sarah Mitchell. They'd met 10 years ago when Sarah was a young social worker trying to help Max navigate the system after he'd turned his life around. She'd seen something in him worth saving, had fought to get him approved for his business license despite his record, had checked in on him periodically to make sure he was staying clean and straight. What Max knew but never discussed was that Sarah wasn't just a social worker, she was FBI working undercover in the social services system, investigating a network of corruption and abuse that ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. If Emma's father had been FBI, if that money was evidence, then Sarah would know about it, and she would help if Max asked. He dialed the number from one of the burner phones, praying it was still active. 3 rings, 4, then a click. "This is Sarah." Her voice was crisp, professional, with an undertone of weariness that came from too many late nights and too many broken children. "It's Max, Maxwell Brennan, from Ashford." A pause, then, "Max, it's been years. What's wrong? I need your help, and I need you to trust that I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't important." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm listening." Max took a breath. "I've got a little girl here, Emma Hayes, 7 years old. Her parents died. She was placed in foster care, and something bad happened there. She ran away, showed up at my garage tonight." "Max, you need to call local authorities immediately. This isn't something you can—" "She's got $50,000 in cash," Max interrupted. "Says her father gave it to her before the accident, said it was insurance, that it would keep her safe." Sarah, her father, was FB. The silence on the other end was absolute. Max could almost hear Sarah's mind working, connecting dots, pulling up files in her mental database. "Emma Hayes," Sarah said finally, her voice different now, harder. "Parents were David and Jennifer Hayes. David was a field agent investigating a trafficking network operating through the foster care system. His car went off a mountain road 6 months ago. They called it an accident, but it wasn't." "No, it wasn't. We've been trying to build a case, but every lead goes cold. Witnesses disappear or recant. Evidence gets lost. Someone's protecting this network, someone with serious resources and connections." Max's blood went cold. "And they put Emma directly into the system they were investigating, into a foster home that's part of the network." "Jesus!" Sarah's voice was tight with controlled fury. "Where is she now?" "Asleep on my couch. She's got bruises, Sarah, old and new. She won't talk, just writes things down, and she's terrified. You can't keep her there, Max. If they figure out where she is, where else am I supposed to take her? Back to the system that failed her, to another foster home that might be just as bad or worse?" "To me," Sarah said firmly, "like, I can put her in protective custody, get her somewhere safe, far from here." Max looked through the bedroom door at the small form curled up on his couch, finally sleeping peacefully for what might be the first time in months. She asked me for help," he said quietly. "She trusted me. I can't just hand her off to another stranger, even if that stranger is you." "Max, give me 24 hours. Let me talk to her, make sure she's okay with whatever we decide. Then we'll do this your way, but I need you to do something for me first." "What?" "Find out everything you can about the foster home she came from, names, connections, who's running it, who placed her there, and find out who's been looking for her since she ran away." Sarah sighed. "This is a bad idea. You're putting yourself at risk and her." "I know, but someone has to stand between her and them, at least for a little while. Someone who doesn't have to follow protocol or worry about jurisdiction or chain of command. Someone like a former Hell's Angel with a violent past and a death wish." Max smiled grimly. Something like that." 24 hours, Max. Then I'm coming to get her whether you like it or not, and you're going to tell me everything about that money." "Fair enough. I'll call you tomorrow." He hung up before Sarah could argue further. The burner phone went back in the box back under the bed. Max stood his joints, protesting, the movement feeling every one of his 62 years. He returned to the living room to the armchair by the window. Emma slept on her face, relaxed in a way it probably hadn't been in months. Max watched her, this small stranger who'd stumbled into his life, carrying secrets and scars and a trust that humbled him. The snow fell harder outside, covering the world in white hiding tracks and buying time. Max settled into the chair, resigned to a sleepless night of watching and waiting. Because somewhere out there, people were hunting for Emma Hayes, and they wouldn't stop until they found her and the evidence she carried, but they'd have to go through Maxwell Brennan first, and the Devil's Reaper retired or not still had teeth. Morning came gray and cold, the storm having dumped 8 inches of snow overnight. Max woke with a stiff neck from the armchair, Emma still asleep on the couch. He moved quietly to the kitchen, started coffee, and tried to remember the last time he'd cooked breakfast for anyone besides himself. Emma stirred as the scent of bacon filled the small house. She sat up slowly, looking disoriented, her hand immediately reaching for her backpack to confirm it was still there. When she saw Max in the kitchen, something in her posture relaxed fractionally. "Morning," Max said, keeping his voice gentle. "Figured you might be hungry now. I've got bacon, eggs, and toast. Nothing fancy, but it's hot." Emma nodded, sliding off the couch with the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. She padded into the kitchen, climbed onto one of the 2 chairs at the small table, and watched Max cook with curious eyes. He plated the food, set it in front of her, and watched as she ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd learned not to take food for granted. Max ate his own breakfast in silence, giving her space, letting her adjust to this new reality. When she finished, Emma pulled out her notebook and wrote, "What happens now?" Max poured himself more coffee, considering his answer carefully. "Now we need to figure out how to keep you safe. I called a friend last night, someone I trust. Her name's Sarah Mitchell. She works with kids who've been in bad situations. She wants to help." Emma's eyes went wide, panicked. She wrote frantically, "Are you sending me away? You said I could stay." "Hey, easy." Max held up his hands. "Nobody's sending you anywhere you don't want to go, but we need help, Emma. Smart help from people who know how to handle this kind of thing. Sarah's one of the good ones, I promise." Emma's hand shook as she wrote, How do you know she won't put me back in the system, back with people who hurt kids?" Max set down his coffee, met Emma's eyes directly. "Because Sarah's been fighting that system for years, trying to fix it from the inside, and because I told her what happened to you, and she was ready to drive through a blizzard in the middle of the night to come get you. That's how I know." Emma considered this, her small face serious beyond her years. Finally, she wrote, "Can you stay with me when I meet her?" "Yeah, kiddo, I'll be right there." Emma nodded, then wrote something else. "Mr. Max, why are you helping me? You don't even know me." The question hit harder than Max expected. He looked at the small girl, at the hope and fear warring in her expression, and he thought about Lily, about all the ways he'd failed to protect his daughter, about the 20 years he'd spent trying to atone for that failure. "I had a daughter once," he said quietly. "Her name was Lily. She was 8 years old when she died, and I wasn't there to protect her when she needed me most." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "So maybe I'm helping you because I wish someone had helped her, or maybe I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do, or maybe," he paused, "maybe we're helping each other. What do you think about that?" Emma wiped her eyes, wrote, "I think my dad would have liked you." Max felt something twist in his chest. Yeah, I think I would have liked him too. A knock at the door made them both jump. Max stood quickly, his hand instinctively moving to his belt where he used to carry a knife. Old habits. He moved to the window, peered through the curtain. A black SUV sat in his driveway engine, running exhaust visible in the cold air. The driver's door opened, and Sarah Mitchell stepped out, bundled against the cold, in a practical park and boots. She looked the same as Max remembered, mid-30s, dark hair, pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. But she wasn't alone. The passenger door opened, and a man emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the careful awareness of someone trained in violence. He wore a suit beneath his coat, and Max caught the telltale bulge of a shoulder holster. Max's jaw tightened. "Stay here," he told Emma, then moved to the front door. He opened it before Sarah could knock again. "You brought backup." Sarah had the grace to look apologetic. "This is Agent Michael Torres, FBI. He's working David Hayes' case. When I told him about Emma, he insisted on coming." Torres extended his hand. Max didn't take it. "Mr. Brennan," Torres said, lowering his hand, "I appreciate you keeping Emma safe, but we need to take her into protective custody immediately. There are protocols." "Protocols," Max repeated flatly. The same protocols that put her in a foster home run by the people her father was investigating. Torres's expression hardened. That was an oversight, an unfortunate clerical error, an error that nearly got her killed, which is why we need to move her now before whoever's running this network figures out where she is. Max crossed his arms. "She's scared. She's been through hell. And you want to drag her into some safe house with more strangers telling her everything's going to be fine. How'd that work out last time?" Sarah stepped between them. Max, Agent Torres is right. Emma needs protection we can provide. But she held up a hand as Torres started to protest. We also need Emma to feel safe enough to tell us what happened, to help us understand what evidence her father left behind. And right now, the only person she trusts is you. So, what are you suggesting? Torres asked. Temporary arrangement, Sarah said. We place Emma with Max, emergency custody supervised by me. It gives Emma stability while we investigate the foster home and build our case, and it keeps her out of the system where someone might be looking for her. Torres shook his head. This man has a criminal record, gang affiliation, history of violence. 15 years ago, Sarah interrupted. Since then, he's been clean, owns a legitimate business, no arrests, no incidents, and more importantly, Emma trusts him. It's not protocol. Neither was putting an FBI agent's daughter into a compromised foster home, but here we are. The two agents stared at each other, some silent battle of wills playing out. Finally, Torres sighed. Fine, temporary, 2 weeks maximum, but I want daily check-ins, and at the first sign of trouble, she goes into official protective custody. Agreed? Agreed, Sarah said, then looked at Max. Can we come in? I'd like to meet Emma, if she's comfortable with that. Max stepped aside, letting them enter. Emma sat on the couch, her backpack clutched to her chest, watching the strangers with wary eyes. Sarah approached slowly, crouching down to Emma's eye level. Hi, Emma. My name is Sarah. I'm a friend of Mr. Max's. I know you've had a really scary time, but I want you to know that we're here to help keep you safe. Is that okay? Emma looked at Max. He nodded. She wrote on her notebook, Are you going to make me go back? No, Sarah said firmly. Never. I promise you, Emma. We're going to find the people who hurt you and we're going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. But I need your help to do that. Can you tell me about the foster home? Emma's hands trembled as she wrote page after page of careful details. The house on Ridgemont Street, Frank and Carol Peterson, the foster parents, 4 other children in the home, the locked basement, the man who visited late at night with the briefcase. Max read over Emma's shoulder, his fury building with each revelation. Sarah's face grew grimmer. Torres pulled out his phone, texting rapidly. When Emma finished, she wrote one more thing. My dad's money. He said it was evidence. He said to find someone trustworthy and give it to them. I'm giving it to you. She pulled the backpack onto her lap, unzipped it, and removed the bundles of cash one by one, stacking them on the coffee table, $50,000 in neat $100 bills. Torres's eyes widened. This is David's insurance. We've been looking for this for months. Emma wrote, There's more. She pulled out a small USB drive wrapped in plastic. Dad said this had everything. Names, bank accounts, proof. Sarah and Torres exchanged glances. This was bigger than a single foster home. This was the evidence that could bring down the entire network. Torres reached for the drive. Emma pulled it back, wrote, You have to promise. Promise you'll stop them. Promise no more kids get hurt. I promise, Torres said solemnly. We'll stop them, Emma. Every single one of them. Emma handed over the USB drive. Torres immediately pocketed it, his phone already back out making calls. Max heard words like forensic team and federal warrant and raid. Sarah sat beside Emma. You're very brave. You know that your parents would be so proud of you. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She wrote, I miss them so much. I know, Sarah said gently, and you always will, but they gave you the tools to fight back to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to other kids. That's an incredible gift. Over the next hour, the house filled with activity. More FBI agents arrived, setting up equipment, securing the perimeter. Max's quiet existence had been shattered, replaced by the controlled chaos of a federal investigation. But through it all, Emma stayed close to Max, her small hand finding his whenever the activity got too overwhelming. And Max found himself standing a little straighter, his protective instincts firing on all cylinders. We're going to need Emma to testify eventually, Torres told Max, about the abuse, about how she got the evidence. Can you help prepare her for that? Max looked at Emma, saw the exhaustion on her young face. How about we focus on keeping her alive first, then we'll worry about testimony. Torres nodded. Fair enough, but Brennan, the people running this network, they're going to figure out where that evidence went. And when they do, they're going to come looking. You understand that? Yeah, Max said grimly. I understand. Let them come. Sarah touched his arm. Max, don't be stupid. You're not in the life anymore. You can't just... I'm not planning to be stupid, Max interrupted. I'm planning to keep Emma safe, whatever that takes. The next day brought more revelations. The FBI raided the Peterson foster home, finding 2 more children locked in the basement and evidence of systematic abuse and trafficking. Frank and Carol Peterson were arrested along with 3 associates connected to the network, but the man behind it all, the one Emma had called the briefcase man, remained at large. We've identified him, Torres told Max and Sarah in a secure briefing at Max's kitchen table. Emma was outside building a snowman with an FBI agent who'd volunteered to keep her occupied. Robert Whitmore, wealthy businessman from Boston, lots of legitimate investments and charitable foundations, but underneath he's been running this trafficking operation for years, using the foster care system as a recruitment ground. Max's blood ran cold. Whitmore, Emma said that name. She said her mother mentioned them once, that they were her grandparents who'd cut off contact. Torres pulled up a photo on his laptop. Robert and Patricia Whitmore, Emma's maternal grandparents. They disowned their daughter Jennifer when she married David Hayes, said he wasn't good enough for the family. After the accident, they never attempted to claim Emma. Because they knew, Sarah breathed, they knew what David was investigating. They knew Emma had evidence. Exactly. Robert Whitmore ordered the hit on David and Jennifer, but he didn't know about the insurance policy, didn't know Emma would run before his people could retrieve the evidence. Max's hands clenched into fists. So what's the play? We're building a case, but it'll take time. Whitmore's got resources, lawyers' connections. We need airtight evidence and protected witnesses. Torres looked out the window at Emma, who was carefully placing rocks on the snowman's face for eyes. And we need Emma safe until the trial. How long? Max asked. Months, maybe longer. Max absorbed that. Months of living with a child, months of responsibility, of vulnerability, of caring about someone other than himself. The old Max would have run from that commitment. But the old Max was dead, had died with Lily 20 years ago. Okay, Max said. Then that's what we do. Sarah smiled. You're sure about this? It's not going to be easy. Max watched Emma laugh as the FBI agent helped her add stick arms to the snowman. For the first time in 20 years, his house didn't feel empty. Yeah, he said quietly, I'm sure. The days fell into a rhythm. Max enrolled Emma in the local elementary school under a slightly altered name, Emma Harrison, with FBI documentation backing up the identity. Every morning he made her breakfast, packed her lunch, and drove her to school. Every afternoon he picked her up, helped her with homework, and listened as she slowly began to use her voice instead of just her notebook. Her first words to him beyond those written notes came 2 weeks after she'd arrived. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Emma working on a math worksheet, while Max reviewed invoices from the garage. The house was quiet except for the soft scratch of pencil on paper and the hum of the refrigerator. Mr. Max... Emma's voice was small, tentative, like she was testing whether it still worked. Max's head snapped up. Yeah, kiddo. Emma looked at him with those serious eyes. Thank you for everything. Max felt his throat tighten. You're welcome, Emma. Anytime. She smiled, then a real smile that transformed her entire face, and went back to her math. Max had to excuse himself to the bathroom, where he stood gripping the sink and fighting back tears. She was healing, slowly, painfully, but healing nonetheless. But the peace couldn't last. 3 weeks after Emma's arrival, Max's phone rang at 2 in the morning. He grabbed it before the second ring, not wanting to wake Emma. Brennan, he answered, his voice rough with interrupted sleep. Max, it's Sarah. We've got a problem. He was fully awake now, standing and moving to the window to check the perimeter. What kind of problem? Whitmore's lawyers filed for emergency custody. They're claiming grandparents' rights, saying Emma should be with family. The hearing's tomorrow at 10. Tomorrow? That's not enough time to... I know. They rushed it through. They've got a friendly judge, someone Whitmore's donated to over the years. Max, they're going to try to take her. Max looked toward Emma's room, where she slept peacefully for the first time in months, over my dead body. That's what I'm afraid of. Don't do anything stupid. We'll fight this legally. I've already called a lawyer, someone who specializes in family law and isn't afraid to go up against the Whitmores. Her name's Jessica Park. Will it be enough? Sarah was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but we're going to try. Max spent the rest of the night awake, pacing his small house, planning and discarding strategies. By the time Emma woke up, he'd made coffee strong enough to strip paint and was working on his second pot. What's wrong? Emma asked, standing in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas. Max tried to smile. Nothing you need to worry about. But Emma was too smart for that. She pulled out her notebook. Though she'd been talking more lately, she still wrote when things were serious. Something bad happened, I can tell. Max sighed, gesturing for her to sit. There's going to be a court hearing today. Your grandparents, your mom's parents, they want custody of you. Emma's face went pale. She wrote quickly, the Whitmores. But they never wanted me before. They hated my dad. I know, but they're saying you should be with family, that they can give you things I can't. Emma's hand was shaking so hard she could barely write. I don't want to go with them. I want to stay with you. Please don't let them take me. Max pulled her into a hug, feeling her small body trembling against his. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you here. But Emma, they're rich, they're connected, and I'm just a guy with a garage and a past I'm not proud of. The judge might not see things our way. Emma pulled back, looked at him with fierce determination. Then I'll tell them. I'll tell them I want to stay with you. You might not get to say much. Adults usually do most of the talking in these things. But I have to try, Emma insisted. You tried for me. You saved me when nobody else would. The least I can do is fight for us, too. Us. The word hit Max like a freight train. Somewhere along the way, they'd become an us, a unit, a family. Okay, Max said. Then we fight together. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone and tall columns designed to intimidate. Max held Emma's hand as they climbed the steps, Sarah on his other side, and Jessica Park, a sharp eyed woman in her 30s, leading the way. Remember, Jessica said over her shoulder, let me do most of the talking. Be respectful, be honest, and for God's sake, don't lose your temper no matter what they say about your past. I'll try, Max said grimly. Inside the courtroom was already filling up, and there, sitting on the other side with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit, were Robert and Patricia Whitmore. Robert was in his 60s, distinguished-looking with silver hair and a face that probably smiled in all the right social situations, but his eyes were cold, calculating, assessing Max like a threat to be neutralized. Patricia looked softer with carefully maintained blonde hair and expensive clothes. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, though Max suspected it was performance rather than genuine emotion. When Patricia saw Emma, she gasped, stood up, took a step forward. Emma, sweetheart. Emma pressed herself against Max's side, shaking her head. All rise, the bailiff called, the Honorable Judge Mary Chen presiding. They stood as the judge entered, an Asian American woman in her 50s with stern features and intelligent eyes. She took her seat, reviewed the papers before her, and looked up at the assembled parties. This is a hearing regarding emergency custody for Emma Hayes, currently aged 7. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore are petitioning for custody based on familial rights. Mr. Brennan has temporary emergency guardianship. Let's begin. The Whitmore's lawyer stood first, a shark in an expensive suit named Preston Moore. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. My clients are Emma's biological grandparents, her only living relatives. They are prepared to offer her a stable, loving home with every advantage. Education at the finest schools, a large extended family financial security, everything a child needs to thrive. He pulled out exhibits, photos of the Whitmore estate letters from character witnesses, financial statements showing significant wealth. Compare that to Mr. Brennan, a single man with no experience raising children, a criminal record, including assault and gang affiliation, who lives alone above a garage. The choice should be clear. Max felt his jaw clench, but Jessica's hand on his arm kept him seated. When Moore finished, Jessica stood. Your Honor, may I remind the court that Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore had no contact with their daughter for the 5 years before her death and made no attempt to claim Emma after her parents died. They only appeared after Emma came forward with evidence against a criminal network that the FBI is currently investigating. She presented her own exhibits. Furthermore, we have evidence suggesting Mr. Whitmore has connections to the very network that placed Emma in an abusive foster situation. The FBI is actively investigating these connections. Moore jumped up. Objection. Those are baseless accusations against a respected businessman. Are they baseless? Jessica countered. Agent Torres, would you please stand? Torres stood from the gallery. Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Michael Torres, FBI. I can confirm that Robert Whitmore is a person of interest in an ongoing investigation into child trafficking and corruption of the foster care system. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Order, Mr. Moore. Does your client wish to address these allegations? Robert Whitmore stood, his face red, but his voice controlled. Your Honor, I am a legitimate businessman. I have investments in many ventures, some of which I later learned were not what they seemed. As soon as I discovered any impropriety, I severed those connections. I am cooperating fully with the authorities. Cooperating after your investments were raided, Jessica noted. Your Honor, the timing is suspicious at best. Judge Chen made a note. Anything else, Ms. Park? Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Emma Hayes to the stand. Moore objected immediately. She's 7 years old, far too young to testify. She's old enough to know where she feels safe, Jessica countered. And given that this entire hearing is about her welfare, I think her opinion matters. The judge considered. I'll allow it, but keep it brief and appropriate. Emma stood, and Max gave her hand an encouraging squeeze before letting go. She walked to the witness stand, so small that even sitting down her feet didn't touch the floor. The bailiff had to lower the microphone significantly. Judge Chen smiled gently at her. Hello, Emma. I know this is scary, but I just want to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? Emma nodded. Can you tell me how you came to be living with Mr. Brennan? Emma's voice was quiet but clear. I ran away from a bad foster home. I was cold and scared, and I didn't know where to go. I found Mr. Max's garage, and I hid there. When he found me, he could have called the police or sent me away, but he didn't. He gave me hot chocolate and a warm place to sleep, and he promised to keep me safe, and he has. And your grandparents, the judge gestured to the Whitmores. Do you know them? Emma shook her head. I never met them, but my mom talked about them sometimes. She said they told her she wasn't good enough when she married my dad, that they said my dad would never amount to anything. They made her really sad. Patricia made a small sound of distress. So you don't want to live with them? Judge Chen asked. No, Emma said firmly. I want to stay with Mr. Max. He's not perfect and he doesn't have a lot of money, but he listens to me. He reads me stories and helps me with my homework. And when I have nightmares, he sits with me until I fall back asleep. He makes me feel safe. Nobody else has done that since my parents died. But wouldn't you like to have a big house, go to a fancy school, have lots of nice things? Dig, dig. Emma thought about it seriously. Maybe those things would be nice, but Mr. Max taught me that the important things aren't stuff. They're people who show up and keep their promises, and he's shown up every single day since I met him. The courtroom was silent. One more question, Emma, the judge said gently. If I let you stay with Mr. Brennan, do you promise to work hard in school and be a good kid? Emma nodded vigorously. Yes, ma'am, I promise. Okay, you can go sit down now. Emma returned to her seat, and Max put his arm around her shoulders. She'd done beautifully. Moore called Robert Whitmore to testify next, and the older man painted a picture of regret and redemption, claiming he'd made mistakes with his daughter, but wanted a second chance with his granddaughter. He spoke of family legacy, of giving Emma opportunities, of blood being thicker than water. But when Jessica cross-examined him, she was merciless. Mr. Whitmore, when did you first learn your daughter had died? 6 months ago. And when did you petition for custody of Emma? 3 days ago. So for 6 months, you knew your granddaughter was an orphan and you did nothing. We were grieving. We didn't know. You didn't know until the FBI raided your business partners and Emma's testimony became crucial to their case. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Objection, Moore shouted. But the damage was done. The judge was looking at Whitmore with new skepticism. Jessica called Max to the stand next. Mr. Brennan, you have a criminal record, 3 assault charges, 1 drug possession, all from 15 to 20 years ago. Can you explain? Max took a breath. Your Honor, I'm not going to lie or make excuses. I was a bad man for a long time. I ran with the Hells Angels. I hurt people. I broke laws. And then my daughter Lily died because of the life I was living. She was 8 years old, caught in crossfire during a gang war. That was my wake-up call. He looked at Emma. I left the Angels that day, moved here, started over, been clean for 15 years. I'm not proud of my past, but I'm not running from it either. It made me who I am, and who I am is someone who understands that you can't let a kid down. You can't fail to protect them when they need you. And Emma, why take her in? Because she asked for help and I was there, because nobody else was listening, because I failed my Lily, but maybe I could save Emma, and because his voice cracked slightly. Because she saved me too. She reminded me that life can be about more than just surviving. It can be about actually living, about caring for someone besides yourself, about being better than you were. Jessica smiled. No further questions. The hearing lasted 3 more hours. Character witnesses testified for both sides. Sarah spoke about Max's transformation and Emma's progress. Teachers from Emma's school praised her resilience and Max's dedication to her education. The Whitmores' side brought in family friends and business associates who spoke glowingly of Robert and Patricia, though under cross-examination, several admitted they'd never actually seen the Whitmores interact with children. Finally, Judge Chen called for a recess to consider her decision. Max, Emma, Sarah, and Jessica waited in a small conference room down the hall. Emma curled up against Max's side, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day. How did we do? Max asked Jessica quietly. Honestly, I don't know. Chen's a good judge, fair, but the Whitmores have resources and connections, and blood relation still means something in family court. Even when that blood relation is under federal investigation. We don't have charges yet, just suspicions. Moore's right that Whitmore could be an innocent investor who got duped. It's thin. Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at it, frowned, showed it to Jessica. Torres says they've got more. Financial records linking Whitmore directly to Peterson. They're going to arrest him tomorrow. Tomorrow's too late, Max said. The judge is deciding now. I'll try to get a message to her, Jessica said, standing. Judicial channels, it might help. She left the room, time crawled. Emma dozed against Max, and he stroked her hair absently, his mind racing through scenarios. If they lost, if Chen gave custody to the Whitmores, what were his options? run, take Emma, and disappear into the life he'd left behind. He could do it. He still had connections, people who owed him favors. They could be in Mexico by morning, new identities by the end of the week. But that would make Emma a fugitive. That would mean always looking over her shoulder, never having a normal life, never being free of fear. He couldn't do that to her. So if they lost, he'd let her go. He'd trust the FBI to protect her from her grandfather, trust the system he didn't believe in. He'd let her go and it would kill him. All parties back to the courtroom, the bailiff announced. Max's heart pounded as they filed back in. Emma's hand gripped his tightly. The Whitmores sat on their side, Patricia dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, Robert stone-faced and confident. Judge Chen took her seat. I've reviewed all the testimony and evidence presented today. This is one of the more difficult decisions I've had to make. Max held his breath. On one hand, we have biological grandparents with substantial resources who claim to want a relationship with their granddaughter. On the other, we have a man with a troubled past who has nonetheless provided genuine care and protection over the past several weeks. She paused, looking directly at Emma. But ultimately, this decision isn't about what the adults want. It's about what's best for Emma. Another pause. The evidence suggests that Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore had no relationship with Emma before this hearing, and their timing in seeking custody raises serious questions about their motivations. Additionally, the ongoing federal investigation into Mr. Whitmore's business dealings creates concerns about the safety and stability of that household. Patricia gasped. Robert's face flushed red. In contrast, Mr. Brennan has demonstrated consistent care for Emma's well-being. He has created a stable environment, enrolled her in school, sought appropriate support, and most importantly, earned Emma's trust. And Emma herself has clearly expressed where she feels safe. Judge Chen looked at Max. Mr. Brennan, I am granting you temporary custody of Emma Hayes for a period of 6 months, subject to monthly review by social services. During this time, you will continue to cooperate with the FBI investigation and ensure Emma receives any therapeutic support she needs. If at the end of 6 months the arrangement is working and Emma continues to thrive, we will revisit the question of permanent guardianship. The gavel came down. Emma burst into tears, throwing her arms around Max's waist. He held her close, his own vision blurring, the weight of responsibility and relief crashing over him in equal measure. Across the courtroom, Robert Whitmore stood slowly. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage. He locked eyes with Max, and in that moment, Max saw murder, pure cold intent. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, Emma was his to protect, his responsibility, his daughter, in every way that mattered except biology. Thank you, Emma whispered against his chest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Max kissed the top of her head. You don't have to thank me, kiddo. We're family now. That's what family does. Outside the courthouse, media had gathered, having caught wind of the story. Max shielded Emma from the cameras, Sarah and Jessica running interference as they made their way to Max's truck. Mr. Brennan, is it true you're a former gang member? Emma, how does it feel to stay with Mr. Brennan? Mr. Whitmore claims this is a miscarriage of justice. Any comment? Max ignored them all, focusing on getting Emma safely into the truck. Once they were inside, he locked the doors and pulled out of the parking lot, checking his mirrors constantly for tails. Are we really going to be okay? Emma asked quietly. Max glanced at her, this brave little girl who'd already survived so much. Yeah, kiddo, we're going to be just fine. But even as he said it, he knew the danger wasn't over. Whitmore was powerful, connected, and now humiliated. Men like that didn't forgive, and they didn't forget. Max would need to be vigilant, would need to watch Emma constantly protect her from threats, both obvious and subtle. The judge had given them 6 months to prove themselves, but Whitmore would use that time too, looking for any weakness, any excuse to challenge the custody arrangement. And if the legal route failed, Max knew men like Whitmore had other options, but so did Maxwell Brennan. The Devil's Reaper might have retired, might have traded his leather and his bike for a garage and a little girl's trust, but he still remembered how to fight, still remembered how to protect what was his. And Emma was his now. Let Whitmore come. Let whoever he sent come. They'd find out that some things were worth dying for. And Emma Hayes was one of them. Hayes. The following week settled into a careful routine. Max made sure Emma got to school on time, helped her with homework every evening, and read her stories before bed. He taught her about motorcycles on weekends, showing her how engines worked, letting her hand him tools as he repaired bikes in the garage. Emma thrived. Her nightmares became less frequent. She started making friends at school, joining the art club, bringing home drawings she proudly displayed on Max's refrigerator. She talked more each day, her voice growing stronger and more confident. But underneath the normalcy, Max stayed alert. He noticed the black sedan that sometimes idled across from the school, the unfamiliar face that showed up at the diner twice in 1 week, the phone calls that disconnected when he answered. Sarah noticed too. "We're keeping tabs," she assured him during one of her weekly visits. "Torres has a team watching Whitmore's movements. If he makes a move against Emma, we'll know." "And if he's smart enough not to make obvious moves?" Max asked. Sarah didn't have an answer for that. 3 months into the guardianship, Max's old friend Dave Morrison showed up at the garage. Max hadn't seen him in years, not since Dave had also left the Angels and started over in Utah, running a small motorcycle shop and trying to make amends for his own violent past. "Heard through the grapevine you're raising a kid now," Dave said, watching as Emma helped Max organize spark plugs in the storage room. "Mad Dog Martinez, suburban dad, never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I," Max admitted. "But here we are." Dave studied Emma, who was carefully sorting the plugs by size and labeling boxes with a marker. "She's good for you. I can see it in your face. You look, I don't know, peaceful, less haunted." "Most days," Max agreed. "Other days I'm terrified I'm going to screw this up and damage her more than she's already been damaged." "That's how you know you're taking it seriously," Dave said. "Bad parents don't worry about being bad parents." They watched Emma work for a moment, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she wrote size 14 millimeters on a box. "There's something else," Dave said quietly. "Reason I came, words out in the old circles, about you and the kid, about the court case, about Whitmore. Chains Morrison called me." Max's blood went cold. Chains had been his closest brother in the Angels, the one who'd stood by him through the worst of it. They hadn't spoken since Max left. Oh, what did he want? "To warn you, Whitmore's been putting out feelers, looking for someone who can solve his problem quietly, someone who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty. He's putting a hit on me. Not on you, on the girl." Max's hands clenched into fists. "When don't know yet. Chain says nobody from the old chapters will take it out of respect for what you were, but Whitmore's got money and there's always someone willing to hurt a kid for the right price." Max looked at Emma, humming softly to herself as she worked completely unaware of the death sentence hanging over her head. The rage that filled him was white-hot, primal, the old violence rising up like a flood. "I need names," Max said. "Anyone, Whitmore's talked to anyone who might be considering it. I need to know who's coming." Dave pulled out a piece of paper. Chains wrote down what he knew. 3 possibles, all freelance, all with reputations for taking wet work. "But Max, you can't go after them. You're out of the life. You've got a kid to protect. You start killing people and you'll lose her for sure." "I'm not going to kill anyone," Max said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm going to make sure they understand that Emma Hayes is off limits, permanently. And if they don't take the hint," Max met Dave's eyes, "then I'll do what needs to be done." Emma finished her organizing and came over, smiling up at both men. "All done, Mr. Max. Want to check my work?" Max forced his fury down, smiled back at her. "I'm sure you did great, kiddo. Why don't you wash up for dinner? I'm making spaghetti tonight." "Can we have garlic bread, too?" "Absolutely." Emma skipped off to the bathroom, and Max turned back to Dave. "Thank you for warning me, and thank Chains for me, too. He said to tell you he understands that if anyone hurt his grandkids, he'd burn the world down. Said you were always the meanest son of a bitch he knew, and it's good to know that bastard's still in there when it counts." After Dave left, Max spent the evening being as normal as possible for Emma's sake. They ate spaghetti, watched a movie, and he read her 3 chapters of the book they were working through together. But when she finally fell asleep, Max sat at his kitchen table with Dave's list and a phone. The first name was Marcus Blade Henderson, a knife specialist who'd done work for the Angels in the past. Max still had his number. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Yeah. Blade, it's Reaper." A long pause. "Jesus Christ. Heard you'd gone soft, raising some kid." "That's what I'm calling about. I hear Robert Whitmore might have reached out to you about a job." "Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. Why do you care?" "Because that kid you mentioned, she's mine, under my protection. And if anything happens to her, I'm going to find whoever did it and make them regret being born, slowly." Blade laughed. "That's more like the Reaper, I remember. Relax, man. I don't touch kids. Never have, never will. Told Whitmore to fuck off when he made the pitch." "Good. Who else did he talk to?" "Can't say, code, you know. But I'll tell you this, anyone worth a damn turned him down. You're a legend, Reaper. Guys remember what you were capable of. They're not stupid enough to make an enemy of you over some rich asshole's grudge. And the guys who aren't worth a damn, those are your problem. Watch your back." The second name on the list was Tommy Ghost Richardson, a younger guy who'd never worked with the Angels but had a reputation for taking any job that paid. Max didn't have his number, but he had ways of getting messages through. He sent a text to an old contact, simple and direct. Tell Ghost that Emma Hayes' family, touch her and die. The response came back an hour later. Message delivered. Ghost says he wasn't interested anyway. Too much heat. The third name was the problem. Victor Krause, a former Special Forces operator who'd gone private and didn't follow any code but his own. Max had no connection to him, no leverage, no way to threaten or intimidate him. And according to Dave's notes, Krause had taken the job. $200,000 to make Emma disappear quietly. No body, no evidence, just a little girl who vanished one day and was never seen again. Max stared at that name, feeling the old darkness rising. He could find Krause, could track him down, end the threat before it materialized. One man, one problem, one solution. But that would mean becoming the Reaper again, would mean crossing a line he'd sworn never to cross again, would mean losing Emma anyway, because you can't raise a child with blood on your hands unless the blood was spilled to protect that child. Max struggled with it all night, pacing his small house, checking on Emma's sleeping form every few minutes, warring with himself over what needed to be done versus what he wanted to do. By morning, he'd made his decision. He called Sarah. I need to talk to Torres. It's urgent. An hour later, they met at a diner halfway between Ashford and the regional FBI office. Torres listened as Max explained what he'd learned, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. You should have come to us immediately, Torres said. I'm coming to you now. Can you stop Krause? We can pick him up for questioning, maybe rattle him enough that he backs off. But without evidence of an actual conspiracy, we can't hold him. And Whitmore's too smart to have made the contact himself. It'll be buried under layers of intermediaries. So what are you telling me? That Emma's in danger and you can't do anything about it? I'm telling you that we'll do what we can within the law. We'll increase surveillance on Emma, put protective detail on the school monitor, any suspicious activity. But Max, you can't take matters into your own hands. You do that and you lose her for sure. Max's jaw clenched. So I just wait for this guy to make his move. Hope you catch him before he gets to Emma. Sarah put her hand on his arm. Let us do our job. You focus on keeping Emma's routine normal, keeping her safe day to day. We'll handle the bigger threats. It wasn't enough, but it was all he had. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Max's life. He saw threats in every shadow danger, in every stranger's glance. He varied Emma's route to school, insisted on walking her to her classroom door, picked her up early whenever possible. Emma noticed, Mr. Max, are you okay? You seem worried about something. Just being careful, kiddo, that's all. But Emma was smart, too smart to be fooled by vague reassurances. Is it the bad people? Are they coming back? Max knelt down to her level. I'm not going to lie to you, Emma. There might be people who want to cause trouble, but I promise you I will keep you safe, no matter what. Okay. Emma hugged him tight. I know you will. You always do. That trust, that absolute faith in him made Max more determined than ever to be worthy of it. The attack came on a Wednesday afternoon. Max was at the garage, finishing up work on a customer's bike when his phone rang, the school number. Mr. Brennan, this is Principal Matthews. I'm afraid there's been an incident. Max's heart stopped. What kind of incident? Is Emma okay? She's fine. She's safe. But a man tried to approach her on the playground during recess. He claimed to be her uncle, said you'd sent him to pick her up. The teachers didn't believe him and called security. By the time they got there, he'd fled. Max was already moving, grabbing his jacket, heading for his truck. Did you get a description? 6 feet tall, medium build, dark hair, wearing a black jacket. One of the teachers said he had a scar on his left cheek. The police are on their way, but I thought you should know. I'm coming to get her. Don't let her out of your sight. Max made the 10-minute drive in 6, his mind racing. Scar on the left cheek. That matched Krause's description. The bastard had actually tried to grab Emma in broad daylight from school. When Max arrived, Emma was in the principal's office, sitting next to Sarah. The FBI agent must have been monitoring the police scanner, had gotten there even faster than Max. Daddy, Emma ran to him using the word she'd started calling him a few weeks ago, and Max caught her up in a fierce hug. I'm here, sweetheart. You're okay. You're safe. There was a man, Emma said against his chest. He said he knew you, but I didn't recognize him. And Mrs. Patterson taught us never to go with someone unless you told us first. So I said no, and I ran back to the teacher. You did exactly right, Max said, his voice rough with emotion and rage. You were so smart and so brave. Sarah stood. Torres is reviewing security footage now. We've got units searching the area, and we're putting out an APB on Krause. He's blown his cover, which means he'll either run or go to ground. Either way, we'll find him. And in the meantime, Max asked. In the meantime, Emma doesn't go back to school until this is resolved. I'm arranging a safe house somewhere Whitmore and his hired killers can't find you. How long? As long as it takes. Max looked at Emma, saw the fear in her eyes, despite her brave words. This wasn't the life he wanted for her. Hiding, running, always looking over her shoulder. She'd already had too much of that. There's got to be another way, he said. Sarah's phone rang. She answered, listened, her face growing hard. Understood. We're on our way. She hung up, looked at Max. They found Kraus. Dead. Single gunshot to the head, professional execution. Happened sometime last night. Max felt cold. Whitmore cleaning up loose ends? Maybe. Or maybe someone else decided to handle the problem for you. Max thought of chains of the old brotherhood code of the way the angels had always protected their own. Someone had sent him a message. They had his back even after all these years, but it also meant the threat wasn't over. Whitmore would just find someone else, someone harder to track, someone who wouldn't fail. We need to end this, Max said. We need to take down Whitmore, put him away where he can't hurt Emma anymore. Torres arrived at the school within the hour, looking grim. I've got news. The financial investigation paid off. We can prove Whitmore's been laundering money through the foster care network, taking kickbacks from trafficking operations. We've got him on RICO charges, conspiracy, fraud. It's enough to put him away for 20 years. When's the arrest? Max asked. Tomorrow morning, federal marshals will take him into custody at his office. No bail given his flight risk and the nature of the charges. Max felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. It's really over. The immediate threat, yes. But Max Torres's expression was serious. Emma's going to need to testify about her parents, about the foster home, about Whitmore's visits. We need her statement to connect all the pieces. Max looked at Emma, who'd been quiet through all of this, taking in the adult conversation with wide eyes. She's 7 years old, I know, and I wouldn't ask if there was another way. But Emma's the key to making sure Whitmore never threatens another child. Her testimony could save dozens of kids. Emma tugged on Max's sleeve. When he knelt down, she whispered in his ear, I want to do it. I want to help stop the bad people like Daddy did. She meant her father, David Hayes, the FBI agent who died trying to bring down this network. But she was also including Max in that, seeing him as part of her family of protectors. You sure? Max asked. It won't be easy. You'll have to talk about things that scare you. Emma nodded, her jaw set with determination that reminded Max of himself at his stubbornness. I'm sure. You'll be with me right every second, Max promised. The preparation for Emma's testimony took 3 months. A child psychologist worked with her, helping her process trauma while preparing her for the courtroom experience. Sarah coordinated everything, making sure Emma felt supported and safe. Max sat in on every session, watching as Emma grew stronger, more confident. She practiced speaking about the foster home, about seeing Whitmore there, about the locked basement and the other children. Each time was difficult, brought back memories that made her cry or freeze up. But each time she pushed through, driven by the desire to help others. Your daughter's remarkable, the psychologist told Max after one session. Most children her age couldn't handle this kind of stress, but Emma's resilient partly because of what she's survived, but mostly because she knows she has you. That sense of security is what allows her to be brave. The trial began in federal court on a cold morning in early spring. Max sat in the gallery directly behind Emma, close enough that she could turn and see him whenever she needed reassurance. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Financial records showing money flowing through Whitmore's accounts, testimony from Peterson who'd turned state's evidence in exchange for a reduced sentence describing Whitmore's role in the trafficking network, phone records, emails, surveillance footage. But the most damning evidence came from Emma. She took the stand wearing her best dress, her hair in neat braids. Max had learned to do through patient practice and YouTube tutorials. She looked tiny in the witness box, but her voice was steady. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Reynolds, started gently. Emma, can you tell the court what happened after your parents died? Emma spoke clearly, describing the accident, the funeral being placed with the Petersons. She talked about the locked basement, about being hurt, about the other children who were too scared to speak. And did you ever see this man? Reynolds showed her a photo of Whitmore. Yes, he came to the house 3 times that I saw. He brought a briefcase and talked to Mr. Peterson in the office. One time I heard him say something about shipments and payments. What did you do with the evidence your father gave you? I kept it safe like he told me to, and when I ran away I took it with me. I gave it to Mr. Max because he was safe. He protected me when nobody else would. Whitmore's lawyer, Preston Moore, tried to discredit her during cross-examination, suggesting she was confused, that she'd been coached, that she was too young to understand what she'd really seen. But Emma held firm. When Moore tried to confuse her about dates, she calmly explained her reasoning. When he questioned her memory, she provided specific details that could be verified. When he suggested Max had influenced her testimony, Emma looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Max taught me to tell the truth, even when it's hard. That's what I'm doing. The truth is that man, she pointed at Whitmore, was at the Peterson house. The truth is he was part of hurting kids. And the truth is my daddy died trying to stop him. The courtroom was silent. Moore had no more questions. Over the next 3 days, Emma testified for a total of 6 hours. She never wavered, never broke, though Max could see the toll it took. Each evening, they returned to the safe house where they were staying during the trial, and Emma collapsed against him, exhausted and traumatized all over again. But she'd done it. She'd told her story, had given the jury everything they needed to understand the scope of Whitmore's crimes. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, Whitmore was convicted on all counts, 18 separate charges, including conspiracy to commit murder for David and Jennifer Hayes. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Patricia Whitmore, who'd pled guilty to minor charges in exchange for testimony against her husband, received 5 years probation and was required to divest from all Whitmore business interests. Emma's testimony had brought down an empire. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Emma, how does it feel to bring your parents' killer to justice? Mr. Brennan, what's next for you? And Emma, Max shielded Emma from the cameras, Sarah and Torres running interference as they made their way to the car. But before they got there, Emma stopped, turned back to the cameras. I just want to say something, she said, her small voice carrying in the sudden quiet. The reporters fell silent, microphones extended. There are lots of kids out there like me, kids who got hurt, who lost their families, who don't feel safe, and I want them to know that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to not know what to do, but keep looking for your person, the one who will protect you and believe you, because they're out there. I found mine. She looked up at Max. Mr. Max saved me, and now we saved each other, and that's what family does. Max felt his throat tighten, his vision blur with tears he didn't try to hide. This brave little girl who'd survived so much, who'd fought so hard, was teaching him what family really meant. The final custody hearing was almost anticlimactic after the drama of the trial. Judge Chen reviewed the reports from social services, heard testimony from Emma's teachers and therapist about her remarkable progress, and listened as Emma clearly stated her wish to stay with Max permanently. Mr. Brennan, the judge said, you've exceeded every expectation. You've provided Emma with a stable home, supported her through unimaginable trauma, and demonstrated unwavering commitment to her well-being. I see no reason not to make this arrangement permanent. She signed the papers. Congratulations, you're officially Emma's legal guardian. Emma threw herself into Max's arms, laughing and crying at the same time. We're really a family now, really, really. Yeah, kiddo, Max said, holding her close. We really are. The years that followed were marked by the ordinary miracles of growing up. Emma's 8th birthday celebrated with a party at the garage where Max's employees decorated everything in purple, her favorite color. Her 9th birthday, where she asked for a bicycle, and Max taught her to ride in the parking lot behind the garage, running alongside her until she found her balance. At 10, Emma joined the school robotics team and discovered a passion for engineering. Max learned about circuits and programming, helping her build competition projects late into the night, both of them covered in solder flux and grinning. At 11, she started volunteering at the animal shelter, coming home every week with stories about the dogs she'd walked and the cats she'd socialized. Max found himself with a rotating cast of foster animals in his house, Emma arguing passionately for why this particular dog or that particular cat needed them. He always gave in. At 12, Emma had her first school dance. Max learned to French braid hair through trial and error, YouTube videos playing on his phone, while Emma sat patiently offering instructions. A little tighter, Dad. No, not that tight. Perfect, Dad. She called him that, now had for years, the word as natural as breathing. The garage expanded. Max hired more employees, started a program for at-risk youth, teaching them mechanical skills and giving them a path out of the same darkness he'd escaped. Emma was his unofficial assistant on weekends, handing him tools and chatting with the teenagers who came through the program. Your dad's pretty cool, one of them told Emma. He actually gets it, doesn't judge. Emma smiled. Yeah, he's the best. Max overheard and his chest felt so full he thought it might burst. But there were hard times too. Emma still had nightmares, sometimes would wake up screaming, and Max would sit with her until she fell back asleep, his presence the only thing that calmed her. She struggled with trust, with letting people close, always waiting for them to leave or hurt her. Why do you stay? She asked him once when she was 13 and going through a particularly rough patch. You could have had an easier life without me. Max pulled her into a hug. Maybe, but it wouldn't have been a better life. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Emma. Don't you ever doubt that. even when I'm being difficult, especially then, because being difficult means you feel safe enough to show me the hard parts, not just the easy ones. That's what family does. We stick around for the messy stuff. Emma graduated from middle school at 14, having skipped a grade. She was accepted to a prestigious science and technology high school in Reno, which meant a longer commute, but opportunities, Max insisted, were worth it. He drove her every day, 90 minutes round trip, refusing to let her take the bus. It was time together, time to talk or sit in comfortable silence, time that Max treasured. At 15, Emma started talking about college, MIT, she said, or Stanford, somewhere she could study engineering and build things that helped people. What kind of things, Max asked. Prosthetics for veterans, Emma said immediately. Assistive technology for people with disabilities, maybe even trauma recovery devices. I want to take what hurt me and turn it into something that helps others heal. Max had never been more proud. She graduated high school at 16, valedictorian of her class. Her speech talked about redemption and second chances, about the power of one person choosing to help, about family being more than blood. She never mentioned Max by name, but everyone in the audience knew who she meant. MIT accepted her with a full scholarship. Max helped her pack his heartbreaking and soaring in equal measure. You don't have to go so far, he said, folding her clothes into boxes. There are good schools closer to home. Emma hugged him. I have to do this, Dad. I have to see what I'm capable of, but I'll call every week and I'll come home for holidays and you'll visit, right? Try to keep me away, Max promised. At MIT, Emma flourished. She called every Sunday without fail, sharing her research and her struggles and her triumphs. She came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, bringing friends who were amazed to discover that her guardian was a former biker with tattoos and a heart of gold. Max's hair went fully white, his joints ached more, but he'd never felt more alive. The youth program grew, touching dozens of lives. Kids who came through the program stayed in touch, sent updates about their lives, credited Max with giving them a chance. And through it all, Emma's presence shone like a beacon, guiding Max toward becoming the man he'd always hoped to be. Emma graduated from MIT with a PhD at 24. Her dissertation on adaptive prosthetics won awards, caught the attention of major research institutions and private companies. She had offers from everywhere, could have gone anywhere. She chose to start her own company developing affordable assistive technology for people who needed it most. And she based the company in Nevada, close enough to visit home regularly. For Max's 70th birthday, Emma organized a party at the garage. The space was packed with people, employees, past and present, kids from the youth program who were now adults with families of their own, neighbors and friends, and the community Max had helped build. Dave Morrison was there, older and grayer, but still strong. Sarah Mitchell, who'd moved on from the FBI but stayed in touch. Even Torres showed up, retired now and working as a consultant. Someone had strung lights across the ceiling and music played from old speakers. A banner read "Happy Birthday, Max" in purple letters, Emma's touch obvious. Max stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed. How had he gotten here? From the Devil's Reaper, feared and violent, to this man surrounded by love. Emma found him by the cake, her arm around his waist. What are you thinking about, old man? How lucky I am, Max said simply, like how one scared little girl changed everything. One scared little girl and one brave man who chose to help her, Emma corrected. She pulled an envelope from her pocket. I got you something. Inside was a photograph, beautifully framed. It showed the youth program's latest graduating class, 15 teenagers, standing with their completed projects, pride on every face. In the corner, smaller, was a photo of 7-year-old Emma sitting on a motorcycle in Max's garage, her eyes wide with wonder. Beneath it, an inscription, Second Chances Auto and Youth Program, founded by Maxwell Brennan and Emma Hayes, building futures from broken pieces since 2008. Max's vision blurred. Emma, you always said broken things can be beautiful, Emma said softly. You proved it with me. Now we're proving it with every kid who walks through those doors. That's your legacy, Dad. Not the violence or the past. This, all of this. Max pulled her into a fierce hug, this daughter of his heart, this girl who'd stumbled into his garage one snowy night and remade his entire world. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me, for saving me, for being the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for being my dad, Emma said, not because you had to, but because you chose to, every single day. Later that night, after the party wound down and the guests had left, Max and Emma sat on the front porch of his house. Their house, really, Emma's name was on the deed, now joint ownership, acknowledging this was home for both of them. The desert stretched before them, stars blazing overhead in the clear night sky. Max thought about the journey that had brought them here, all the pain and fear and courage it had taken to build this life. You know what I realized today? Emma asked, breaking the comfortable silence. What's that? But that night I found your garage. That night you found me. I thought you were saving me, but really we were saving each other. I needed someone to protect me and believe in me, and you needed someone to remind you that you were worth more than your past, that you could be someone's hero instead of their nightmare. She turned to face him. We fixed each other, Dad, and now we're fixing the world one kid at a time. Max took her hand, this woman who'd been a frightened child when they met this daughter who'd given him purpose and redemption and a future worth living. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, we are. They sat together as the night deepened, father and daughter, two broken pieces that had found each other in the darkness and become something whole. The past still existed, it always would, scars that marked them both, but it no longer defined them. Instead, they were defined by the choice to protect, to heal, to show up for each other day after day, by the family they'd built from nothing but love and stubbornness and an unwillingness to let the darkness win. Maxwell Brennan, who'd once been the Devil's Reaper, now spent his days teaching troubled kids to find their way. Emma Hayes, who'd once been a silent, terrified child, now built technology to help others overcome their limitations and trauma. Together, they were proof that redemption was real, that love could transform, that broken things could become beautiful. That family wasn't about blood or biology or perfection. It was about who showed up when you needed them most, who stayed when it got hard, who chose you every single day. That was family, that was home, that was everything. And as Max sat there with Emma's hand in his, watching the stars wheel overhead, he understood that this was the life he'd been fighting toward all along. Not the violence, not the fear, not the running. This peace, purpose, love, a second chance, hard won and precious, a daughter who'd given him back his soul, and a future that for the first time in his entire life he was no longer afraid to face.